experiences. Thank you, Amanda, and welcome their funds of knowledge. And so we're going to be thinking broadly about policies, and I welcome each of you to share in the chat perspectives from your respective schools and counties in Nevada. All right. So I'm going to start off. I'm sorry, I went too fast. I want to start off with a story. Now, this slide is intentionally blank because I want to share some stories with you, and I just want you to be able to listen and not be distracted by any visuals. And these stories are really just testimonials that paint the picture of how school policies can shape how students think about themselves and their classmates. And so I just ask you to fully engage by limiting your distractions and really being able to listen to the stories that students are sharing about their experiences. If you are unmuted, please be sure to mute yourself. For the first 6 weeks, kids had to be silent during lunch. After 6 weeks, kids could talk if they earned talking privileges. In what world is lunch one of the few times kids are allowed to be social, doing something meant to be social, eating lunch? How does that become a privilege to talk? Why did kids have to earn the right to speak? If kids spoke on their walk from class to lunch, they either got detention or silent table. Silent table meant you could not speak the entire lunch period. Teachers who let kids slide and speak were immediately pulled to the side and forced to give a consequence or force kids to go into the silent table. It was disgusting and unacceptable. That's one student's story. The second story. During my 8th grade year, a teacher would often tell us, whenever we give you guys any freedom, you run with it. I couldn't help but think about a quote from Frederick Douglass's memoir. If you give a N-word an inch, he will take an L. They never stopped to consider that maybe if we did have more freedom, we wouldn't lose our minds over something as simple as 8 minutes to talk during homeroom. Nothing about this system is normal for people our age. We have everything taken away from us, and even then they threaten to take the bare minimum. It's ruined my social well-being, and I find it harder to connect with people ever since I came here. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to testimonials, just stories from 2 middle school students in the New York area who were enrolled. I think one was enrolled in a charter school and the other one in a public. So what I'd like to do now is just to open the floor. You can drop some thoughts in the chat, just like, what is your initial reaction? Or if you'd like to unmic, if you could please use the raise the hand feature, and Amanda can help me to identify who would like to share. What's your initial reaction to hearing these stories? I see the chat is being utilized. I want to make sure that I see that as well. I'm just going to stop sharing. I'm sorry, I didn't have to do that. I want to make sure that I can just participate and see. Let me minimize this. Okay, now I can see a little bit more. Oh, wow. It sounds like they were prisoners at school. Sad. If we would only listen to the wise words of children. I agree, Sue. Zakia, that is a catch-22. Why do we take away student voices? This is Kristen. And then complain that they won't share their thoughts or ideas. Isn't discourse something we want to encourage? Wow. Control and conformity. Thank you, Carolyn. Jessica, that was my grade school reality. Wow. Lauren, sounds like a former prison. I love teaching young students how to self-regulate emotions and how to develop self-control so that I don't have to silence students. I want them to speak. Thank you, Dolly. Thank you, everyone who's sharing in the chat, and just be sure to review what your colleagues are sharing in the chat. These are very insightful connections as well as reflections on what was the stories that were just shared. Lauren, we remove their chances to learn how to socialize. Yeah, I read that one. Thank you all for engaging in that. And it's exactly everything that you said. It's partially the policing of how students act. Requiring them to be silent in one instance, and then demanding that they participate. And what I saw in the chat was really informative, and I think very valid for right now, for this discussion that we're having. And it's being able to equip students with the skills necessary to know when there's that balance, right? So thank you all. I really appreciate it. Some other questions that come to mind when I hear these stories are just, what would we say were the goals of these policies? Because I don't think that there was malintent necessarily, right? But what were the goals of these policies? Who was at the table when these policies were being written? What's been the outcome of these policies? We heard the outcome from the students' lips. So thank you all. Just wanted to bring those questions to mind as we continue to engage. So since I'm using the word policies quite frequently, I just want us to norm around this definition, which are externally imposed behavioral norms decided by few stakeholders. And those are often those who are least affected by the policies. So the stories we just heard can reveal how policies, which we just defined, can be counterproductive to the types of cultures that we actually want to create in our schools and our classrooms. And so we need to think about who are the stakeholders, who's at the table, who's making them. And it's also not lost on me, and it was already raised in the chat, that this word policy is very closely related to policing, which refers to the maintenance of public order, safety, health, and enforcement of laws. Now, of course, in a school, there is a degree of the reinforcing of safety for our students, but these things are not necessarily the ultimate goal of schooling. So in order to envision a new type of education that supports all learners, we need to start with the purpose of schooling and education. And oftentimes policies fall short because they focus on maintaining order and safety, but which are important, but don't encompass how to cultivate these qualities that we want to see in our learners. And so the priority becomes that order and safety, and not necessarily the education, the growth of our students. So in this slide, I have juxtaposed an image of a classroom and also a prison. And what I want to just give you the opportunity is to think about what are some of the similarities, just even in design, that you may notice. Some similarities in the design that you may notice. And once you have some similarities that come to mind, feel free to drop it in the chat. I think it's happening now. Let me just escape so I can see what folks both seem cold and unwelcoming, confined spaces, tightly constricted rows. Yeah, they're rows. Unwelcoming, not welcoming. Hard, cold floors, separate, isolated, yet crammed together. Yeah. Control, recognize, sterile environment. Thank you all. Limiting, keep those thoughts coming. So we see that there's a lot of similarities, particularly with these two pictures. And I know not every classroom is set up in rows, but I just wanted us to look at these specific images in juxtaposition. The lighting, black and white photos also make them both seem unwelcome, for sure. Tania, thank you for highlighting that. Jillian, I hate rows. I love the classroom where they can talk with their peers in their groups. Okay, we're getting there now, Jillian. The design of our classroom and how it invites discussion or not. how it invites student thought in their funds of knowledge or not. And it actually does begin with how we actually set up our classroom learning environment. So thank you all for jumping in and sharing your thoughts there. And some of the similarities that come to mind for me are exactly what have been shared in the chat. Even some other pieces that may not be present in these pictures. Some schools have dress codes, right? So there's a uniformity in the way that our students might show up, depending on what school you work in and the policies there. Often emphasis, well, if we tie it back to the stories that we heard, the student stories that we heard at the beginning, an emphasis on silence and order. Students walking in lines, depending on the grade level. I see it more so in elementary settings, and to a degree, it is helpful. And so thank you all for taking that time. I think maybe something else, set times, like those set times enforced for eating, for play, so there are some similarities here. And what I want to take us to now, because we did discuss policies, is something that is more community-centered. Remember when we discussed policies, we said there's a specific group of stakeholders at the table who are designing those policies, and oftentimes those most affected by the policies are not included in that conversation. When we think of shared values, these are mindsets, behaviors, cultures that are cooperatively developed and agreed upon, ways of being that include those most likely to be affected, right? So we really want to begin thinking about, how do we create a culture of co-creating shared values with our students, shared values with those most affected by what we're implementing. Shared values meaning the principles and beliefs that guide behavior and help community members determine what to do when there's no specific rule to guide them. And that definition is adapted from Triple Crown leadership. So what I'd like for us to do is to spend some time reflecting. I've been chatting a little bit, but I want us all to get involved a bit more. And thank you all for participating in the chat. So what we're going to do next is going to require a little bit of a Google search, possibly, unless you just have a fantastic memory and this is at the top of your mind still. The Google search is for you to search your secondary school, your high school, 9 through 12 school, whatever that was, their mission statement. So I did a little bit of research before I came to meet you all today, and my high school's mission statement was to where is it? Oh, here we go. To create a community where excellent teachers prepare a diverse student body to have a positive impact on society and a lifelong passion for learning. All right, I'm going to give you all a minute. Go ahead, search your alma mater's mission statement, and if you can just copy it and drop it in the chat so we can all see. Oh, it's already happening. Let me get in here. Let me see. Let's see. Oh, love it. Thank you, Kristen. You're on it. The Valley High School community seeks to educate its diverse population in a safe, nurturing environment by providing opportunities to maximize academic progress, cultivating positive social development, focusing on the transition from school to careers, and practicing responsible citizenship skills. Oh, your school was not playing, Kristen. That is full. Thank you. Keep it coming. And after you dropped yours in the chat, be sure to read what else is being posted here. And see if there's any through lines, if there's any similarities that you see among the mission statements that are posted in the chat. Love it. These are so empowering. Okay. Would anyone like to unmic and share any similarities that are coming up for them as they read these mission statements? Or if you just want to drop it in the chat, like I noticed, maybe a word that sums it up.
I just wanted to comment, Dolly Rowan, that it appears that all of our mission is for student success and how we're going to provide that support.
Yes.
My personal motto is always, you can and you will succeed and I'll help you. And it's just that simple, and it's not even an option. Failure is not an option. And I've had that same attitude and drive and passion from high school to elementary. And every student I've had in 27 years have had parent had my personal number, phone number, and continuous contact. And no matter how much that kid messed up, I'm there. And you're going to fix it. I'm going to help you. And I've just always been successful with kids in all populations and all grade levels, because I think that motto has really pushed me through.
Dolly, thank you so much for sharing that. What I hear when you shared is that you have high expectations for every student that you interact with.
Oh, absolutely.
Every student.
Teach early childhood autism. Kids come in with adverse behaviors, nonverbal. They can and they will, and they always do. I have never been disappointed with the student. And most of my kids go out gen ed normal, what you consider normal.
Dolly, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. One, just taking the risk and unmiking in front of a group on Zoom. That's not the easiest thing. And just for sharing a bit of your philosophy with us. It was really beautiful to hear. So thank you. And thank you all for continuing to put your mission statements in the chat. I think I saw someone trying to sum it up and they were saying promoting and developing. So thank you all. What I do want to highlight as we continue to search our high school's mission statements and read other mission statements is that most school leaders and teachers do not intend to create spaces that operate in the ways that we described the previous slide. Remember when we saw those similarities between school and prisons? They don't intend to create spaces like that. And most schools do have missions that include something around creating lifelong learners or cultivating risk takers or critical thinking, like all of these 21st century, I'm tired of that term, it's like right now skills. And rarely do we see, I would dare say never do we see mission statements that refer to cultivating compliant students. However, the thing is, if we aren't intentionally swimming upstream, we flow downstream. And the downstream flow is to create policies that over-regulate students in areas that have little to do with learning. So what I invite you to do now is to take time to think of a policy that often catches students off guard or that students complain about a lot. What comes to mind? You know, you hear it from them all the time, so it should be right there. Whatever that policy is that either catches students off guard when you try to enforce it, or that students complain about all of the time.
Dress code, phone usage.
Dress code and phone usage. Thank you for contributing that. Indeed. Oops, sorry, you all.
No hoodies. Not
No.
being able to put your hood up in class, which is such a big deal to like administration. But I'm like, I have teenagers of my own and I taught middle school, and a hoodie is not a hoodie, it's a security blanket. And if that student feels comfortable wearing it, that's what makes them feel safe. Why would I make them feel unsafe in my classroom because it's a policy?
Kristen, preach. Indeed. Indeed. Let me try to go over here and see what's happening in the chat as well. Oh, foul language. Dress code. Lauren is co-signing you, Kristen, saying I couldn't care less if students wear hoodies. You had a lot of agreement in the chat. No tag. I've heard from the district. Toys, or plush buddies at school. I'm wondering if that could also be a comfort issue. Dress code for girls specifically. Thank you, Jessica, for that. Yeah, I'm definitely, hoodies seem to be a theme, as well as the cell phone policies and dress code, which would fall under hoodies as well. Yeah, okay. So definitely seeing some themes that are arising. And, what I now want to invite us to just think about is like, why is there pushback here? Why do students complain? And Kristen, I just want to thank you for walking us through just even your thinking around hoodies, and how it can be a comfort for students. It could also be a cover for students if they're feeling like, oh my gosh, my hair isn't done. I don't want to, there's other reasons for why they might be complaining. And what I want us to dive into is, if students are complaining about these specific policies, what information are we able to gather from them based on this? What data is that giving us? And then what I want us to think about is whether or not this specific policy serves the mission of the schools that we teach in any way. Just something to think about. Does it even serve the mission? I'm seeing more happening in the chat. I just want to make sure that I see that I'm up to date on it. Drew, times are changing. We have to move with them. Drew, that's it. Target, hitting the nail on the head. Times are changing. We have to move with them. Yes, the dress code that targets girls is divisive and discriminatory. Ooh, dress codes don't teach you how to think or discuss or how to be a person. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you, Virginia. Here, at least students do not. I think I may have missed your first comment that maybe that's linking to, but I really do appreciate all of the thoughtfulness that I'm seeing in the chat. Thank you all for your reflections. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, seeing some other factors. Lauren speaking to parents voting. So, okay, that once again, it goes back to our conversations about stakeholders, who's at the table. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so moving forward, we're going to dive into a little bit more tinkering. And at length, that means that we're going to try to just get our feet wet with examining strategies, policies together by using a tool. So the tool that we're going to use today is a set of questions that will interrogate specific school policies to see if it upholds with the missions at our school. So I know that we looked at our alma mater school mission, but I invite you to also look up the school mission where you currently work, if that's available to you. And what I'm going to do is share with you the set of questions that we're going to be using as we look at sample policies together. So the first question that we're going to be asking is, what is the purpose of this policy? Why was it created? Second, who does this policy negatively impact or exclude? The third question, what mindset does this policy communicate? What belief system does this policy communicate? And lastly, what meanings are implied? Okay, so this is going to be our pathway to exercise our muscles in examining policies. So in the next slide, I'm going to model a few responses to these questions based on a sample policy. I invite you to also jump in and share your thoughts in the chat. And then we'll dive into a little bit of doing this in small groups. I'll take a poll and just see what people are thinking, if they like to do in small groups or just stay together and just kind of quietly reflect. So the sample policy is, here we go. Students' hair must be kept neat and well groomed throughout the day. The following hairstyles will not be allowed. Radical hairstyles, including mohawks, tails, spikes, unusual shapes, steps, cuts, lines. This is so specific, right? Directions or partial shaves will not be permitted for boys or girls. And this is taken from an actual handbook. The next one is hair colors other than natural hair color will not be permitted. Unnatural hair colors include, but are not limited to, blue, green, silver, maroon, etc. Okay, so that's a sample policy. The first question that I'm asking is, what is the purpose of this policy? Okay, what I'm thinking about, the purpose might be to encourage some form of uniformity so that students aren't distracted by differences in appearance, that they are focused on the academic learning, and that undue attention, especially based on hair color or shape of hair, isn't an issue in the classroom. The next question, who does this policy negatively impact or exclude? Well, I would say there's quite a few groups that fit, that could be excluded. When I look at unusual shapes, I think about how my hair naturally grows up and out. It doesn't grow down. So I'm wondering if just that automatically puts me in a position to be breaking this policy. The cuts, the lines, the directions. I also think about braided hair, especially cornrows, and how lines and directions are a part of that style. And that is the way that in my culture, we show that our hair is well kept. Hair colors other than natural hair, especially like middle school age kids, they are all exploring with hair colors. And so developmentally, this policy might even just be kind of preventing students from exploring how they want to present themselves in the world. The next question, I love that the chat is being used. Please see what your colleagues are stating. What mindset does this policy communicate? That there is an academic look, that there's a way that you show up that shows that you are studious, that there's a look for what that is, for what a scholar, for what an intellectual is. And the meanings that are implied are, if you're not adhering to this, then you are not a scholar, that you're not an intellectual, that you're not an academic. So that was me using the questions that I shared with you as a tool to interrogate a policy. I'm going to pause to see all of the goodness that is happening in the chat, because I know there's a lot of goodness happening there. Oops, sorry. Let me go back and see. Sorry, you all. I'm unable to see the chat unless I exit full screen. So that's why I keep going back and forth. Oh, some good discussion is happening in the chat. Oh my goodness. Okay, so purpose, control of students. Oh my goodness, it's hard for me to even find the flow. I'm just loving that the conversation is happening. Christy, to limit self-expression, yeah. Yes, the groups that it excludes. I see people of color and creatives, many groups. Michael, it's communicating conformity, try to create a distraction. Oh, that's possibly why it was created, the purpose. Yes, distraction-free environment. Unusual, Carrie, that's thank you. And so once we start to interrogate the policies, more questions come. And Carrie's question, unusual, who determines that? Right, unusual to whom? Right? Is there a specific mindset or culture even that's determining what unusual is? Kristen, I feel like I'm missing pieces of what you're sharing, and it seems like it's so good. I'm just seeing like the high performing compliant child impacts almost every student. Standardization.
Sorry, that's my own child. My daughter has
Yes.
blue hair with an undercut that's shaved all the way on one side and on the bottom. She's artistic. It's an expression of who she is. And this policy would mean that she wouldn't be able to go to the school. And yet she's an AB student in all honors classes. She's compliant. She's never been in trouble for behaviors. There's nothing about her that you should be policing what she looks like. There's nothing about anybody you should be policing what they look like, because we're saying what you look like matters more than who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And it's like, if she did attend this school, she would be getting in trouble every day, right? Which would then distract her from the work that she needs to do. And you could just play the whole thing out. A and B student, that would drop. Why? She's probably getting pulled out of class, all of those things. Lovely. Thank you so much, you all, for this conversation that's happening in the chat. Yes, Lauren, right. And if you exist outside of the norm, you're deviating from uniformity. That's it. Assimilation is required. So these are some of the things that are implied as we're using this tool to interrogate a policy. So that was just a sample policy that I modeled for you. And now what I'd like your feedback on, because we're going to spend the next 10 minutes looking at several policies, several more policies. Would you rather be able to go into groups and look at, you're going to have 3 policies to choose from. We'll just have 3 breakout rooms and look at a policy together and jot your thoughts on it, Jamboard, regarding that policy? Or would you rather just 10 quiet minutes here in this space working in the Jamboard? I know sometimes when we say breakout rooms, it's like, oh, it's not the time, I'm not feeling it today. So breakout or stay together, breakout or stay. Here, I'm seeing a lot of here, stay. Okay, Tanya, I see you. She said, please too. Yes, okay. Totally understand. Yeah, Kristen, breakout, but I know sometimes you want to be able to talk. It seems like, oh, thank you, Dolly. Well, I'll give it a try and we'll see who has access. But thank you for alerting me to that. Okay, so I'm gonna drop the Jamboard in the chat. So you'll see that there are the actual screenshots of the policy there and the questions. And if you haven't used Jamboard before, you can go to the left side, you can select the sticky note icon, and then just type your responses. And once you do, it sticks to the board for you, okay? So let me just copy the link and drop it in the chat, and then I'll start the timer and we'll have 10 minutes to just choose 1, choose 2, as much as you can do in 10 minutes, and drop your thoughts there. I see people are in the Jamboard. Please let me know if you're able to write notes and comments. It should be editable. Okay. I'm assuming we're good to go. All right, well, what I'll do is I'll start our timer with a little bit of music, and I'll stop sharing so that you can just work on it, and we'll come back and share afterwards, okay? Thank you all. Well, you know what, let's see. Get this music going for you, actually. Sorry, I'm gonna keep it going here so I can still see the chat, and I'll put us back to seconds left. Thank you all. Just gonna stop it because I don't know if a bell sound goes off. That always just makes me feel after the soothing music. But I want to thank you all for your input. The discussion on the Jamboard is so rich. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And this is the work here, right? I saw that Virginia, thank you, Virginia. I don't know if you were able to access the Jamboard, but you made a way and you just started dropping your comments in the chat. I really appreciate that. And she was just highlighting the importance of there being some type of, structure, rules, values, something that's there. And I absolutely agree with that. And the purpose of this workshop is to support us in thinking critically around what those rules are and making sure that they actually support the mission of the school, and that they're not unintentionally doing harm to students. So thank you for raising that. What I'd like to, we only have about 10 minutes left. What I'd like for us to do is just to take some time to share some takeaways and thoughts. So there's a lot on the Jamboard. If there's anything that you saw as you were engaging in written dialogue on the Jamboard that you just like to elevate by unmiking and sharing, please feel free to do so now. This is the time.
I was wondering about policies, policies like the turning in the work after absence policies, because the students are stakeholders in that, but the teachers are as well, right? And sometimes those policies are in place because it becomes impossible for a teacher to manage work if it's constantly late or if there's a lot turned in late. So I was wondering about how you have that conversation, although I guess my policy on this kind of thing is to try and create norms within the classroom with the students' involvement. So talking about what your norms are in that situation. I don't like the word rules. I work with norms. We talk about norms. We started out with talking about what the norms in a restaurant are when you go out. And then we talk about norms for learning and what norms need to be in each situation in a classroom in different environment, in your classroom environment in different situations, and how we develop those norms together. What do you need this to look and sound like for you to be successful? But I think it's interesting to say you have to find a way to balance that question and things like this, right? Because obviously you don't want to penalize a student who's absent to the point where they can't recover. But on the other hand, you don't want to put so much weight on the teacher that they can't function.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's the delicate balance. And also, I think you answered it. Like, it's in conversation with those students as well, right? Like, there are situations that are out of students' control. I saw some of those posts on the Jamboard. Maybe their parents aren't involved. They can't get an excused absence. Maybe, they're working and they can't get a hold of them. Like, there's so many, we could name so many different scenarios. And so there are exceptions. And I think a lot of it is exactly what you said, having those conversations. And this conversation was coming up in the chat, not specifically around that policy, but the importance of having structures in place, but with that flexibility as necessary. And I really appreciate what Carrie was sharing. And I'm sorry, and actually before, thank you, Carrie, for sharing. Lots of policies are in place for adults, not students. Yeah. But TL, I'm not sure if I'm saying the name correctly, but you're right. The purpose of this workshop wasn't to say that rules are bad. And so I hope that no one is walking away with that. You're absolutely correct. But it really was to evaluate the purpose and the implications. You hit it on the nail. And so when there's need for flexibility, when there's need for those conversations, like you were saying, Kristen, that we're able to have that so that students aren't unduly penalized to the point where they're, like you said, unable to recover, or because of circumstances that they have no control over, that they're unable to achieve that success that Dowdy was talking about earlier. So thank you. Okay.
This is Carol. I'd like to add to that if I can. I wasn't able to post on the Jamboard for some reason, but you talked about penalizing and double negative. So, and the purpose of this is looking at the impact of those policies. So on one of them is when we do, when our students aren't able to make up the work, which they do become credit deficit. I'm involved in a school now that has in their policy that they are not allowing credit deficit students to enroll. And it's a public school. And, I've presented data indicating that, as freshmen, there's like 0.8 who become credit deficit, 0.2, or by their sophomore year, it's up to 18%. Anyway, so on. By the senior year in the state of Nevada, we're about a 34% of our students are credit deficit. And I'm, explaining to the school that doesn't mean 34% of our students statewide aren't enrolled. We have to accept them. We're setting them up for failure. Every day in a classroom is safe. So, we have to look beyond and beyond what one policy will affect a secondary policy, which affects really the outcome of life for a student. Where are we putting them in regards to graduating with a diploma or without a diploma? What type of financial impact? So we always have to keep that in the back of our mind. So thank you.
Carolyn, thank you so much. I think that was a great way to round us out. Thank you. We're thinking about the future impact of our interactions with students and how, but really what that is it can become a generational impact. So really thank you, Carolyn. And I thank everyone for their participation in today's session. Amanda, I'm getting close to time, right?
Yes, we have about 2 minutes left.
Okay. If there's anyone else that has anything burning that they'd like to share quickly, please feel free to do so. Okay, the conversation is continuing in the chat. If not, I would just like to thank you for joining us today. And what I would like to leave you with also is just a resource. This is actually a Padlet that has resources where we can continue learning about the biases that can show up systemically, especially in policies. So you can just open up your camera and you can scan the QR code if you'd like to have access to that Padlet. And I know someone in the chat was referencing rigidity and like if we are rigid in our interactions with students that we can't expect flexibility from them. I want to thank you for saying that because I also wanted to leave you all with a quote from Link's co-founder who said, "The more rigid the expectations, the less opportunity for innovation." And schools are spaces of innovation. They're spaces of not just teaching, but learning, and not just for our students, but for ourselves. And so I thank you for coming today to learn alongside me. And I just want to wish you well. And I hope that we get to see one another sometime in the near future. Please take care.
Thank you, Rohia, too. We appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you, Amanda.
And just a reminder for everyone, please take the feedback survey that I posted on the chat. So that way we can have your feedback and from this presentation. We appreciate it. The next session will start at 1:45. Thank you, everyone.